Hello everyone, welcome back to another Top 10 Commander video. This time I want to go over the 10 best lands in the Commander format. This was, believe it or not, a very difficult video to make, because you do have to consider that some really good lands have just been taken for granted because they are that ubiquitous. It's kind of like a Sol Ring situation. There are just some cards that are harder to get, sure. So we do have to take into consideration, I think, a lot of different lands here. And this is, of course, all just my opinion, like literally every other video I make. Number 10 here, I have Field of the Dead. Field of the Dead might just be one of the most explosive lands that we've received in the last couple of years. It's a rare situation where it has nothing to do with mana production, but it's more about a landfall trigger whenever it or another land enters the battlefield under your control. If you have 7 or more lands with different names, you get a 2/2 black zombie creature token, making this such a low effort card with massive upside during the game. Means if you have nothing else to do, just play a land and you get a 2/2 zombie. There's so many decks that can take advantage of that trigger. You can get lands back from your graveyard and play them. This will be even more powerful if you can do that. And a commander option such as Golos totally makes Field of the Dead even more powerful. And then number 9 we have Sanctum. Now if this is on the list, you obviously know something else is later on, but Sanctum for enchantments, if you have a land that can tap for more than just 1 mana at a time, you're going to get pretty far in the game. Sanctum taps for 1 white for each enchantment you control, which there are a ton of enchantment decks in the format. We have some pretty solid commander options to choose from. It's only white mana, yes, that's the one complaint. If you had any complaint about these lands from Urza's Saga, it would be that it only taps for that 1 color's mana. But who cares, that's insane mana production, even if it's just white mana. And then number 8 we have Ancient Tomb. Obviously, side by side, if you can play one over the other, and your deck's able to, Sanctum of course, but Ancient Tomb, universally I would say, is one of the better lands that you can play in Commander, because at the cost of dealing 2 damage to yourself, you have Sol Ring on a land. And it's not like Temple of the False God, it's not conditional. You can get this out turn 1 and it's going to provide you with mana, which means it's so much better. Colorless decks view it as a staple because it absolutely gets you quicker to what you want. Tapping for colorless mana means you can fit it into just about every single deck. It sees a ton of play in competitive EDH for this reason. It is essential to many. And then number 7 we have Cabal Coffers. Cabal Coffers may not be those lands from Urza's Saga that can tap for whatever mana equal to a certain permanent type you control. However, in combination with something like an Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth, it can do a similar thing for all of your lands, for all of your swamps. You pay 2 mana and tap it to add 1 black to your mana pool for each swamp you control. The strength of mono black in Commander is really the reason why I would have this above something like a Sanctum or an Ancient Tomb. Black has some fast mana, you have things like Dark Ritual, but without the strength of Cabal Coffers, black would be significantly weaker in the Commander format. You could talk about all the mana doublers. Cabal Coffers is the best. You want to get a ton of mana quickly, play a Cabal Coffers, and then you just have to pay 2 more mana and tap it, and you get a ton of black mana in your pool. Or I guess we can't say pool anymore, so I apologize, but you know what I mean. And then number 6 we have Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx. Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx is what you would have if you took Cabal Coffers and said, you know what, if you're playing a monocolored deck, all you need is Devotion, and here's your mana. This means that you have to set up for it, which is the only drawback. You need a board presence for Nykthos to actually put in any work, so it's not something that's going to help you get off to a quick start. That being said, it definitely helps out the decks that need mana production. So if you're looking for it in mono white, even mono red, blue, you need more colored mana. Nykthos is an auto-include. Definitely helps at times to even the playing field between monocolored decks and some very competitive multicolored ones. And then number 5 we have Boseiju, Who Shelters All. One of the most underrated lands in Commander period, but one that can definitely win you games. Comes into play tapped, you can pay 2 life and tap it to add 1 colorless mana. If that mana is spent on an instant or sorcery spell, that spell can't be countered by spells or abilities. This is a card I recommend highly if you do not have counter spells, meaning if your deck is not playing blue. This is the one competitive edge you have against blue decks. So if you are playing in a more competitive play group, just recognize that you are going to need some kind of answer. you are going to need something like a Boseiju to at least guarantee that one of the spells that you cast cannot be countered. So it could be something massive, it could be a Torment of Hailfire, which if you're in black, you're going to want that to resolve. Now depending on how you value instants and sorceries in the format, it could be swapped with number 4 here, which number 4 is Cavern of Souls. It's very similar but for creatures. It's a little bit more flexible too because it doesn't enter tapped and you don't have to pay life for that mana. You choose a creature type, you add 1 mana of any color, you spend mana only to cast it on that creature type, and that creature cannot be countered. So Cavern of Souls offers your creature protection. And you might be saying, well, this is clearly for a tribal deck, but what you might not know is that tribal decks are actually incredibly common. Most people play tribal, they play tribal vampires, they play tribal dragons, zombies, warriors, slivers, elves. It's useful in just about every deck that is playing tribal, for the same reason why Boseiju is in Spellslinger decks that don't play blue, you don't have counter spells. You need your cards to resolve, you need your creatures to resolve. I just think that Cavern of Souls is a little bit more flexible as a land. It's not going to require you to pay 2 life and it will still tap for 1 colorless. I just think it's one of the most powerful lands you can have in a deck. And then number 3 we have Gaius Cradle. No doubt you knew exactly what I was talking about with Sanctum. This is just way more powerful. It's also incredibly expensive and we have to consider that whenever we do top 10s, whenever we have a ranking. For the 1000th time, yes, I acknowledge that proxies make cards like Gaius Cradle playable, but there's still a ton of people who don't play proxies. You have people who are anti-proxy, you have people who are pro-proxy. Gaius Cradle is incredibly expensive, it's the most expensive land on this list, by a mile, but it's arguably the best land in the whole game. It taps to add a green to your mana pool for each creature you control, which is a little bit easier, it's a little bit more common than having enchantment decks. If it was easily available, if it wasn't on the reserve list, every deck that played green would run a Gaius Cradle, there's just no question about that. The rest of my reasoning for Gaius Cradle is the same exact for Sanctum. And then number 2 we have, and again this is really why I think this list was hard, because I have to justify putting some cards over Gaius Cradle, putting some cards over Cavern of Souls, because they are ubiquitous, but I think Reliquary Tower at number 2 is fair. You have no maximum hand size. This is something that people take for granted all the time, but it's a card that so many people regret not playing. I can't tell you how many times I've played myself and have used a tutor to grab a Reliquary Tower just so I don't have to discard down to 7. So many people do that as well. So many people forget to play a Reliquary Tower and they have to discard a bunch of cards. Just because it's not an overpowering ability doesn't mean it's not one of the most valuable ones. And there are certain problems in the Commander format that you're not going to run into in others. Drawing past your maximum hand size and being forced to discard happens way more often in Commander because it's a slower format. Reliquary Tower is just a convenience card, but it's a very useful convenience card that is incredibly ubiquitous. So before I go on to number 1, let's talk about some honorable mentions, and there are a ton. If you want to spend even more money, we have the Tabernacle at Pendrell Vale. Not something that sees a ton of Commander play, but its ability is incredibly powerful. We have the newer card War Room, which is a very good card in monocolor decks. If you're looking for good card draw on a land and you don't have to pay too much life, this is the way to go. We have Dark Depths. This is a good combo card if you want to get your Merit Lage token. There's a cool little combo where you can do that pretty easily, so it does see a ton of play in Commander. We have Gemstone Caverns, more of a competitive EDH choice because you're able to cheat it out there early on. It is one of those rare turn 0 plays. Then we have Volrath's Stronghold, another card that will no doubt be more expensive in the future. Academy Ruins is essentially the same thing, but for artifacts. So number 1 is Command Tower. This is really the reason why this was such a difficult list to make, because side by side, again, Command Tower is never going to be as powerful as a Gaius Cradle. It's never going to be as powerful as a Cabal Coffers, a Sanctum. It's not going to provide you with some sort of added benefit like a Reliquary Tower or a Cavern of Souls, or even a Field of the Dead. Command Tower is just the most played land. It's your go-to whenever you're looking to play a multicolored Commander deck. If your deck is 2 colors, there's a reason to play it. For the same reason why I think Sol Ring is the best mana rock in the Commander format. It's not fancy, it's not overrated, it just does the same exact thing every single game. It's reliability, and the fact that it's been reprinted a million times, it's easy to take it for granted. And I understand you could easily go for an Exotic Orchard, you could go for City of Brass, you could go for Mana Confluence. Command Tower is just the guarantee that no matter what your deck is playing, you will be able to play it. But that's just my opinion, so feel free to let me know in the comment section below what are your thoughts on the 10 best lands in the Commander format. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, the notification bell so you don't miss any future ones, leave a comment as well. Let's talk about this. Void here signing off. Have a wonderful day.